If you've played this game long enough, or pretty much any gacha game, you'll realize that sometimes just spending the in-game currency on the latest and greatest stuff always isn't the best thing to do. Usually these terms are coined by bait banners or bait summoning sessions or anything that would relate back to bait, just something in the game itself that can incentivize the player to continue spending their in-game currency, or in some cases spend actual real-life money on, I guess this, I don't know, it's this thing, you like this? You want to spend money on it? Yeah, you sure do. And Faye is really no exception to this whatsoever. It could be a good banner with good skills, or nothing remarkable, or just plain bad guys as something good, or something that is absurdly good that is really difficult to just skip entirely in most cases. And when it comes to Faye, they are very much the master at baiting. You see, the joke there was jorking your speed, and at this current time, Faye is going on its 8th year of active service, which is pretty remarkable for what it's worth. But naturally, with that much time put into the game, there's been hundreds of cycles banners throughout the entire lifespan of Faye, and because of that, there's definitely going to be some standouts, which is what I wanted to talk about today. This is a history of Faye's biggest bait banners, and for brevity's sake, ground rules. Pretty much everything that's going to be brought up here either leveraged on skills or abilities that people actively sought out regardless of their quality, or left field additions that were specifically there to capitalize on willful spenders. If it were just a matter of slightly better units with decent skills, then every banner would be a bait banner, and I think a lot of people would argue that every banner is a bait banner, but that's not what this video is about. I'm talking about stuff like the Fate's Valentine's banner, with the first offensive healer special in the game. Initially, healers didn't debut with any sort of damaging special. They were pretty much just locked to support as healers, you know, restore HP, do whatever, your basic RPG related stuff. The only problem is that it wasn't a very worthwhile thing in the game itself, and I don't think it really ever has been, at least to the point where you would actively run a healer. A lot of the time people did pain plus double savage blow strategies just to get a lot of chip damage off, less than actually use their healing capabilities. And as time kept going on with the game, a lot more specials were continually added that all sorts of other characters could use except healers, until last year's Valentine's banner, where we got a Fate-centric banner with the very first offensive healer special. The problem was that it was completely garbage, and that's putting it lightly. When it first came out, Elise was the only one who was able to use it because she innately came with it. She had a slaying staff with cooldown acceleration gimmicks built into her staff, meaning that every second hit she was able to proc her special with no issue whatsoever. The problem is that if you wanted to inherit it to any other healer, most of them were not able to get it off at all, and it was virtually worthless on every single healer that wasn't Elise, which is really funny when you consider that a lot of people were waiting for this skill or any sort of offensive healer special to get into the game, only for it to be incredibly garbage. And it would be one thing if it were just brand new healer special that people have been waiting for, they're going to try and make use of it. The bigger problem came after the banner, because less than 2 weeks later, they released another new heroes banner with a healer special that, surprisingly, a lot more healers could use. Before, most other healers were stuck with a 3 cooldown special that were just never getting off in any scenario. The only archetype that could potentially get it off, quote unquote, you can't see my quote unquotes, but I'm doing the quote unquotes, were infantry, because they had access to stuff like Times Pulse, but they still lacked acceleration gimmicks to where it was still really difficult to get it off no matter what. Now, with the brand new healer special, the new healer special, it was 2 cooldown, meaning that every single staff could realistically get this special off. Obviously, it would have been a lot harder for some over the others. This only coming less than 2 weeks later than the Valentine's banner completely tells me that they were specifically predicating on the people that were really looking to get any sort of healer offensive special. And the easiest thing you could take out of this situation is don't immediately pull on any banner until you see what comes next. I don't think that's too hard to ask, because these banners last for several weeks at a time. talking about banners that had very good value comparatively, we could go as far back as the last winter banner, which was, I mean, only 6 months ago, but it's still definitely worth talking about because everything on the banner had some sort of value, and it was usually at a very high degree. You had Winter Yunaka, who was a really good dagger cavalry unit, who also had incredibly good fodder in the form of Flared Sparrow and Assassin Strike, which is still one of the best offensive combos that we have to this day. Winter Edelgard, while not necessarily having the best fodder, is still one of the best player phase units in the game. Winter Dimitri, who is an incredibly good fodder factory akin to Yunaka, and Winter Byleth, who was at the time the best save in the game. He's still pretty decent for what it's worth, but as far as the entire banner was concerned, everything had some sort of value, on top of the fact that you could spark multiple times, which for anyone who doesn't know, or I assume you know because you're watching a Fae related video, but for anyone who doesn't know, it allows you to guarantee get any unit on the banner after a certain amount of summons, which meant that you could guarantee get some of the best stuff in the game at that point in time. It was by and large one of the hardest banners to skip in the game ever, in my opinion, just because there was way too much value going on that specific banner alone. And usually we get a lot of good stuff throughout the year, but that was probably one of the biggest standouts that we just ever gotten by that point in time. For what it's worth, I don't think there was a banner in year one at the very least that could have at least be relative in terms of scope to the Fire Emblem 3 house. We love 3 houses. We love 3 houses, Fire Emblem 3 houses winter banner. Although one of the standout banners for all the wrong reasons back in year one was the Ira debut banner. It was initially announced that Ira was going to be getting into the game with stuff such as Sigurd, Deirdre, Teotihu, Arden. They were adding a lot of characters. The problem is that she showed up in the game, but she wasn't on any banner with Sigurd or Deirdre or Teotihu. She wasn't a freebie. She wasn't really anything. And we only then found out that she was added as a separate character to a color share banner full of units that weren't really good besides her. And I could go more into this, but there is another video that you could watch down below. Although by this point in time, it's most likely outdated because of the framing and the title of the video. And you're manually blinking now. Ira, when she came out, was arguably one of the strongest units in the game because of her special Regnal Astra, which scaled 40% of her own speed, on top of the fact that she was incredibly fast just from the get-go. I'm pretty sure she was the fastest unit in the game by the time she came out. She could access other skills that would allow her to one-shot pretty much anything in the game as long as she was able to get her special off. She could always get her special readily active because of Wrath having cooldown at the start of every turn. She could run a Slaying Edge so that her special would become 1 cooldown. It was a really nasty combo that she herself could do, but the problem is that she was sharing with some of the worst characters in the game by that point. And to say that it wasn't really incentivizing to go for somebody like her, despite the color share that was very active there, that could have easily ruined any chances of getting Ira, because back then we didn't have any spark system. That was added back in book 4. It was a nightmare to say the least. It was so bad. It was so bad. Although I guess in terms of good color share banners, we had the Dual Peony banner, which Dual Peony, even to this day, is still an incredibly good dancer because she can effectively dance 2 times in 1 turn. She has her regular dance, which already has a good amount of effects, and then she has her button, which also dances any adjacent ally, which is really useful for pretty much every single game mode. When she came out, she was the de facto best support in the game, and it was very evident why. The only problem is that when she came out, it was an immediate double share banner with last year's New Year units, meaning that if you wanted to get her, it was going to be a lot more difficult. I don't know why they decided to do it like that, but the best support unit in the game, arguably, just on a banner right there, but you had to fight through something like New Year Left to get it, was not exactly ideal. The only saving grace is that she did have good fodder, so even if you did get her, you could still fodder her off to so many units because at the time, attack speed solo and low speed defense were very good. But despite that, the fact that they even put her on a double share meant that it was still really worth going for. The share was good. You had a lot of other units there that were still relatively good in their own right. A lot of the units from the last banner weren't exactly great as is, but they were kind of separated into their own really garbage category anyway. But if you wanted the best support unit in the game, you had to go for it, and I didn't go for it. But I did get her free the following year because of tickets, so I guess I won in the end. I don't know. I don't think there's any winning when it comes to playing Fae. Anywho, the last one I really want to mention is the first pirate banner that we got. I think it was the first one. Or it was the second one. Well, we got a pirate banner and it had Pirate Hinoka on it. And she was specifically designed to counter Brave Hector. The problem? She didn't counter Brave Hector. Back around that period of time, Brave Hector was one of the best units in the game because of the weapon refine that he did inevitably get. To put it into perspective, it was essentially a 2-year early weapon refine because they then released another unit that was pretty much on a similar level to him 2 years later. It was very much ahead of its time, and the biggest make or break with it was most definitely the fact that it had no armor effectiveness, which meant that he basically had no weaknesses with much higher BSD than the rest of the game, with the only downside of, I guess, the weapon triangle, but that was more of a weapon suggestion because he also had distant counter. If you didn't one-shot him or do anything of the sort, you were absolutely dead. Pirate Hinoka was an attempt to counter him because she got player phase brave, she got adaptive, so it was always going to target his res, and she was green. The only issue is that she just didn't do enough damage for it to really matter at the end of the day. He could have accessed something like deflect missile with hardy fighter, and at that point he was pretty much just shrugging off every single hit from her. It was kind of ridiculous, especially at a time where it was just not really that easy to get any sort of piercing special that would have otherwise gone around deflect missile. This would definitely be one of those times where something for a unit that was specifically designed to deal with something that couldn't really deal with the thing they were designed to deal with was definitely on the scale of baiting people into believing they could do it. It probably could have dealt with really bad Brave Hectors, but I don't think there really were any bad Brave Hectors by that point. The only thing I do want to mention though, even though it goes against the entirety of the video, is one special mention because it is so antithetical to the entire premise of a bait banner that I just can't not mention it. And it is the Fates Bath banner we got back in 2019. Back in 2018, early 2019, there was so much burnout with Fire Emblem Awakening and Fates that most people just didn't want to deal with it whatsoever. And it was so bad, especially on the Fate side, because we got basically the same characters all the time. Camilla definitely being the most standoutish because she got 4 versions in the span of roughly a year. So to start out the 3rd year Fae, they decided to release a Bath banner that was very Fate-centric and then release only Fate's royals on it. So Ryoma, Elise, Hinoka, Sakura, and as the freebie, Camilla. I mean, to put it lightly, it was just very, very poorly received. So much so that I'm pretty sure it bombed critically in the game as well. I can't say whether or not that was the case, but I'm very sure that with the amount of dislike that the banner did have in general, I can't imagine a lot of people really pulled on it. The problem though is that this banner was actually incredibly good on the inheritable side, at least, because they were all pretty much generics. You had Ryoma and Sakura, who were most definitely the standouts here because of their inheritable weapons. Bath Ryoma had its curtains, which essentially was a quick impulse 2 lance, and you had Sakura, who granted quick impulse to the highest attack ally on turn 1. These were by and large some of the best inheritables in the game for years, because the former could allow lance units to gale force with so much ease, and it also put Azura on the map a bit because she was also able to gale force and then dance an ally. It was incredibly useful. And then you also had Grand Scratcher Plus, which granted quick impulse to any ally with the highest attack, and with Fae mechanics and how they determined with attack matching or any sort of stat matching, you could give this out to multiple units at once, and it was generally just a really good support weapon for any staff unit. But because it was surrounded by Fate's Royals, I'm very certain a lot of people did not summon for it. Although as far as this banner is concerned, I would probably say this is the most anti-bait banner we've ever had, which again goes against the whole premise of the video, but I have to mention it. I just have to mention it. But I guess also as far as Fae banners are concerned, this is probably going to be about it. I'm sure there are more banners that fall into either of these categories, but I find that amongst all the hundreds of banners that we do have, also with whatever memory and research and blah 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 that I could really conjure up, these are probably the most standoutish of the bunch. But if you do have any other banners worth mentioning, let me know about them down below. And if you want to see more videos like this, make sure to like and subscribe. And until next time, I'll see you later.